This is an illustration of applying glass tape to a fillet joint. Well, why would we do that? Well, we do that when we want to create a really robust joint. And many plans that are available for small designs revolve around plywood construction with fillet joints, and very often the designer will call for that joint to be reinforced with a glass tape. So we have some ingredients here, all of the ingredients that we need to do this work. Now, where should we start? Well, of course, we start with preparation. All of our surfaces should be clean, dry and well abraded. So I'm just going to sand the fillet joint here with some 80 grit sandpaper, and you'll see that it will change colour. I'm going to dust that off. And you'll see here that I've still got some areas that have been missed by the sandpaper. It's very important to scrupulously sand the surface. So I'm going to sand this a little bit more. Notice how I'm holding the abrasive grit paper with a nice radius on it so it catches the fillet. Clean this off. And now I've got a surface that's ready to be bonded to. I'm going to also make sure that I abrade the wood, because you can see here there's a residue of epoxy from the filleting process. So I'm just going to sand that. And now you can see I've got a surface that's ready to bond to. So how do I go about doing this? Well, the first process is to wet out the wood so that the glass fabric isn't starved of resin. So I really want to prime this surface with the resin hardener mix. So I'll do that by initially making sure that I employ good health and safety techniques. You can see I'm wearing long sleeves. I'm going to put these blue nitrile gloves on, which will avoid skin contact. Very important to avoid skin contact when working with epoxy. And also, I'm going to make sure that I have some eye protection, and I'm going to use my safety glasses. I only need a small amount of mixed epoxy here to prime this surface. So I'm going to meter out 1 pump of resin and 1 pump of hardener. Then I'm going to use one of our plastic mixing sticks. These are reusable plastic mixing sticks. And I'm going to spend 2 minutes blending the resin and hardener together, making sure that I get right into the corners of the mixing pot. And I'm ready to start using this. I'm going to use one of these handy little glue brushes to apply my epoxy. And I'll apply that to the wood to start with. And you can see there's a strong colour change on the fillet that indicates the resin hardener mix is wetting out the surface. I can also, with my brush, if I've applied excess resin hardener mix, I can also use the brush to take that excess off and put it back into the mixing pot. This just optimises the amount of mixed epoxy I've applied to the surface. So I'm now going to leave this for around about 20 minutes for this to wick into the surface wood fibres, just to become slightly tacky, so I can then go on and apply my glass tape. So I've come back to this 20 minutes later, and you can see already that the epoxy has wicked into the surface wood fibres, and it's really started to become nice and sticky, ready to accept my glass tape. I'm using some 50mm wide woven glass tape here, and I'm going to place that very, very carefully so that it's centred along the fillet joint. This is such a common practice with plywood dinghies, particularly race dinghies, where the plywood panels are fairly thin and they do require just a little bit of extra reinforcement to reinforce the fillet joint. I'm now going to metre out 1 pump of resin, 1 pump of hardener. And I'm going to blend the two together. And I'm going to spend 2 minutes again making sure I get a nice homogeneous mix. Making sure I get right into the corners of the mixing pot. I've now been mixing for 2 minutes and I'm now ready to use my epoxy. So I get another little glue brush and I use that to carefully apply the mixed epoxy to the glass using a light stippling action, and you can see how quickly the resin is working for me here in wetting the glass tape thoroughly. This can be quite time-consuming work, so it's really good if you only work with small mixes, and 1 pump of resin, 1 pump of hardener will give you a nice small amount, enough to work with for about 20 minutes with the standard hardener. But if you were working in a warmer environment, you might want to choose one of the slower hardeners that we have available. You can see quite clearly that the resin is really doing its work and wetting out this fabric. It's becoming nice and transparent. It's a good indication that it's thoroughly wetted out. Now that it's thoroughly wetted out, I'm going to consolidate this with the brush, and I'm going to use a stippling action to consolidate the glass. And stippling is actually moving the brush but not allowing it to leave the work. And at the same time, I'm going to take off any small amount of excess resin by using my brush. You can see there's excess epoxy on my brush. I'm going to put that back into the mixing pot. Now obviously this isn't a boat, but it's a very good example of modern boat building techniques. This type of fillet joint, conducted with thickened epoxy and then reinforced with glass fabric, is a fantastic way of making lightweight, really robust structures. Finally, to really finish this off and make your work look fantastic, is the use of peel ply. Peel ply is a sacrificial product. This is a 50mm wide peel ply tape. Now the purpose of this is to leave an impression of the weave of this peel ply fabric in the mixed epoxy. And nylon won't bond to mixed epoxy. So once the epoxy has cured, I can rip this away, and what you're left with is a negative impression of the weave of the peel ply. That's actually better than sanding because the surface is graded. So what this means is you don't have to sand the surface to apply more coats of epoxy or another coat of varnish or bond something else to this structure. So I'm going to lay that down across my glass tape. Just touch that in with my glove. And you see this wets out fairly quickly. We're often asked whether you can reuse peel ply tape, but of course you can't. It has to end up in the bin. We're also asked whether you can add epoxy over the surface of the peel ply tape to wet it out. And of course you can. In fact, it must be wetted out so that it functions in leaving its own impression. And I'll just use my gloves just to smooth this down. And you can see quite clearly that the peel ply and the glass tape have become totally transparent, really good indication that we've got thorough wet out. Now if I leave this to cure overnight, I can come back tomorrow morning and remove the peel ply tape. I'll get a beautifully textured surface underneath, but very, very importantly, on the surface of the peel ply tape, I'm removing any aiming blush that may be apparent.